Is Sodom our future home? Archimandrite Raphael, Carolyn. Sodomite parades are only local clashes, reconnaissance in battle, episodes and fragments of a large-scale attack by demonic forces, both incorporeal and corporeal. This is an attack against faith and morality, against what makes man the image and likeness of God, against humanity itself in man. There is a special type of mental illness, a maniacal desire for filth, when a madman vomits his own feces. This is how the famous writer Maupassant, a literary cynic and a master of profanity, ended his life. And today, some forces want to present us with the idea that eating filth is a rule of human behavior, a right protected by law and police truncheons. What does the unbridled propaganda of depravity strive for? To destroy the Christian faith and, first of all, orthodoxy. It is impossible to unite Sodom and Jerusalem. In ancient times, Sodom fell, and today, in revenge, the storming of Jerusalem is being prepared. To justify the cult of filth and ugliness, it is necessary to present Christianity either as a fanatical, misanthropic sect, as the cruel emperors of Rome did in their time, or to replace Christianity itself with some religious surrogate, to destroy its moral and spiritual foundations, to turn it into a theatrical performance, to replace Christianity with pseudo-Christianity, and the robe of Christ with the garb of a clown. Depravity is a weapon of war against the church. The unrepentant sinner loves darkness. There he hides from the light of his own conscience. The soul damaged by depravity becomes blind and deaf to spiritual impulses. The blind, even if enveloped in the rays of the sun, cannot see any light, just as the unrepentant sinner cannot perceive the main thing, grace, while in church. In ancient times, Sodomites were not only excluded from communion, but for a long time after they repented, they were not even allowed to enter the temple. They had to pray at the church door, as if standing at the closed gate of the kingdom of heaven. If depravity covers the village, the construction of temples will no longer be terrible for the dark forces, and the temples themselves will remain in the country like tombstones of a past, already lost spirituality. Spiritual darkness is not just the absence of light, it is an aggressive element that has seized man. It is the metaphysical darkness of the underworld. Debauchery is the destruction of the family. The family is based on mutual love and respect, and debauchery leads to alienation in people. Filth cannot unite. No matter how much a man falls, he feels the bitterness of sin, the bitterness of his own flesh, the bitterness of his partner. Free sex changes the family, something like a dog's bite, but with the difference that dogs do not indulge in debauchery. Debauchery prevents the reproduction of children. Therefore, it leads to the physical extinction of the nation and humanity. The whole life of a person is reflected in his genes and is coded. Therefore, the descendants of adulterers are already spiritually deficient, experiencing degradation. Debauchery erases the boundary between the two sexes. A man is no longer a man who possesses a male psychological complex, and a woman loses her femininity. In the Middle Ages, the Inquisitors wrote a book, The Hammer of the Tales, which discusses in detail the rituals of secret sections. The book describes how a demon establishes sexual relations with people and at the same time constantly changes its appearance. Sometimes it appears as a woman, sometimes as a man, which is why a transsexual resembles a demon. Here, male virility and female beauty turn into earth and mud. For ancient philosophers, the main thing in a person was the mind, for Christians, the heart, and for modern hedonists, the genitals. Transsexualism considers sexual relations between a person and an animal permissible in the search for new sensations, because it does not see the difference between them. Perverts are now declaring freedom of sexual intercourse with animals, so we must assume that if this does not stop on Shabbat, the issue of registering marriages between humans and the four-legged inhabitants of the earth will also arise. They say that the eyes are the mirror of the soul. Look into the eyes of an adulterer and you will see dirt floating in their depths, a reflection of the filth accumulated in the soul. Beauty has a mystical meaning, and it is in this sense that it saves the village. Beauty is one of the aspects of the divine, and ugliness is the attribute of the demon. And yet, Sodomites are not evil spirits, but people, our genetic brothers and sisters. Therefore, along with disgust for their sin, we should also feel pity for these people because they have deprived themselves of spiritual joy and spiritual beauty. We must fight not only against depravity, but also against demonic forces for the souls of these unfortunate people who seem to be suicidal. And how can we do this? A Christian must set an example of purity and innocence with his life. He must fight sin, and this work must begin from his own heart. He must receive the grace of God, which is increasingly alienating this world. This is evidenced by the invisible power of grace and a visible example. Many Sodomites feel their spiritual catastrophe, the severity of their situation, but they succumb to sin as some creatures do, to the gaze of a snake. Unrepentant sin often turns into despair. A person no longer believes that salvation is possible for him, that he can change, and even more arrogantly gives in to the whirlpool of sin. Only a kind word is able to thaw and awaken the heart of a sinner, while empty curses and reproaches mostly only lead to evil. We must remember that besides the earthly one, there is another, a spiritual, metaphysical plane, in which the good and evil that happened on earth are summed up, and then this good and evil return to us and, as it were, take flesh in historical events, sometimes resembling a blessing and sometimes a curse. Therefore, prayer is necessary, especially the Jesus prayer, which creates an invisible background and a spiritual atmosphere for the work of grace. The apocalypse must come. History cannot be changed, but evil can be stopped. A Christian must always remain a Christian and strive to make his heart the point where heaven meets earth. Through one Christian figure, demonic forces are weakened and the metaphysical darkness surrounding the earth is illuminated. A Christian must fight depravity with all the means available to him. He must stand up to the mass depravity of people, including the parades of Sodomites, who with their marches defile the land watered with the blood of martyrs in Christian countries. It is the religious and civic duty of a Christian to protect his family and nation from moral corruption. Depravity can begin in childhood, therefore we must protect children especially from Sodomites, as from a contagious spiritual disease. We must express our protest within the framework of the law. We must expose the demonic essence of depravity, in particular, the sins of Sodom. We must be preachers of Christianity, but we must confirm our words with the example of our lives. Only then will they have spiritual power. And if the ardent denouncer of sodomy then goes away, calmly sits down at the computer, and begins looking at pornographic images, his words will be like thunder that is not followed by rain and that cannot water another person's parched soul. Sin is not just a personal matter of a person, as some people make us believe. It spreads invisibly, turning a person into a kind of black circle and worsening the spiritual state of people in contact with him. It has been noted that even plants react to a person's feelings. The satanic sounds of rock music and heavy metal have a destructive effect on living beings, as if they emit deadly radiation, and vice versa. The fruits of trees planted near temples and monasteries are especially tasty, and the springs that flow in holy places have healing power. When we communicate with a person, we enter the invisible field of his energy. That is why talking with some gives us strength, as if it renews the soul and flesh, while communication with others depresses and empties us. A person's behavior, his spiritual state, is also reflected in his environment. Some apartments have a calming effect on the soul. A person feels so good within their walls that he does not want to leave. In some buildings, a person feels alarmed. He wants to leave immediately, to run away without looking back, as if ghosts inhabited it or this place was marked by some curse. That is why the parades of the Sodomites, reminiscent of mighty processions, can be considered a ritual defilement of streets and cities with a mystical meaning. Homosexuality is a curse on the human body, on its seed. Why was it that the Old Testament valued the birth of children so much? Why was infertility considered a family misfortune? Because the birth of children was associated with the expectation of the Messiah. What did the custom of circumcision mean? The offering of offspring to God. The oath of the offspring was one of the most terrible and unbreakable oaths. The human seed is the concentrate of life. This is a miracle that the human mind has not and never will comprehend. This is a mystery that no science can fully solve. Dark forces seem to be taking revenge on humanity for the coming of Christ to the countryside. The demon demands from his followers that their children obey his will. In satanic sects, there is a custom of giving the future child to Satan. On the Sabbaths of the Cuteans, debauchery was a necessary ritual act, and the embryos were sacrificed to the devil and food was prepared from them for witches and Cuteans. Therefore, on a metaphysical level, debauchery is a ritual defilement of the seed and the demonization of man. Some people, in order to justify perversion, say that homosexuality is related to hormonal disorders and therefore a sodomite should be viewed as a sick person. But this is not so. In most cases, hormones do not affect the psyche, but the psychic state affects the secretion of hormones. For example, during danger or anger, the hormonal picture in the blood changes. But can this justify violence or murder? Homosexuals are not born. They become homosexuals. This sin is against nature, alien to human nature. It is a rebellion against the will and providence of God, a choice of eternal death, a secret union that a person makes with Satan. Therefore, the parades of sodomites are not at all a declaration of human rights and freedoms. It is propaganda of depravity, violence against the morality and conscience of the nation. Archimandrite Raphael, Carolyn. The source S translated by docs.google.com. Apologues for any errors. Haga Sofa Chapel. May God bless you.